Hi guys, I'm Woodcraft Hamster, and I thought I'd do another one of my short videos on prepping, and this time it's about food. So what I've got behind me here is just a small storage container with some random sort of food items that I tend to keep here in the workshop, just because it's out of the way, it's not taking up too much space in my house. But really what I wanted to show you was just kind of the sort of stuff that I keep, and I tend to, it's stuff that I eat normally anyway. It's things that I'll cook with and that I'll use as a general rule. So what I'll do when I run out in my cupboards at home, I will come in here, I'll take some stuff out of this, and then I'll replace this stuff sort of next time I go shopping. But really what you're looking for in terms of sort of prepping food, especially if you're looking to sort of keep things a little bit more long term, is you want food that's going to last. And that really comes down to things like pulses, pastas, rice, that kind of thing. So for example, I've got 2 big packs of this pasta in here. Yeah, that's probably enough pasta to keep me going for, I don't know, maybe a week, something along those lines. I've got a couple of bags of brown rice. Again, this stuff keeps really well. It generally has quite a long shelf life on there. I've got some chickpeas in here, really good source of protein. I've got some red lentils as well, which again, all these things keep really well. They're dry goods. You don't have to worry about them going off as a general rule, certainly not in a very quick time, the same as you would with fresh food. I do keep a lot of canned food as well. I don't keep it out here because I've got plenty of space in my cupboards. What else do I keep in here? So I've just got some empty bottles, which are just generally quite useful. I do keep a spare gas canister in here, so as I've said before, if there's no gas or no electricity, I'm not able to cook for any reason, I've got a brand new fresh canister ready to go, and again this will probably last me a week's worth of cooked meals, maybe a little bit longer depending on how much cooking I'm doing, and yeah, they're just really useful to keep around. Now in a couple of these bottles I have this. Now this is homemade, and that's just a whiskey or a brandy. I'm pretty sure this is a whiskey, and the bits you can hopefully see, kind of very unappetising bits floating around in this bottle, are actually this stuff. Now this is propolis, and it's essentially a byproduct that comes from the honey making process of bees, and it is said to have very, very good medicinal properties. It's an antifungal, it's an antibacterial, in fact, to be fair, it's pretty much anti-everything from what I can gather. And if you dissolve that in some form of alcohol, you've basically got a very good sort of general purpose tonic. It's something I use quite regularly. If I start to feel a bit run down, if I can feel a cold coming on, sort of a tablespoon of that every day. Normally when I get home from work, you'd have a tablespoon, and the sort of the beneficial qualities of the propolis mixed in with the alcohol. And you do need to use alcohol for it to dissolve. It's a very sticky substance, but I like to keep a couple of bottles of that plus the thing of propolis in there as well, just in case, you know, worst case scenario, you're stuck indoors for a few days, there's been a flood or something, you've got no sort of medications at home, you know, you've got no cold and flu remedies, you've got no sort of just generalised sort of medication, nothing you'd need from a doctor, all over the counter sort of stuff. But this is kind of more of a sort of a natural remedy version of that, and personally I found it works for me really, really well. But that's just obviously a very small selection of kind of what I keep. I mean, in terms of food, I'm lucky enough to have sort of a sort of fairly medium-sized garden, and I do grow my own vegetables in there. I've got, what do I have in my garden at the moment? So I've got radishes, I've got carrots, I've got butternut squash, I've got spinach, I've got kale, there's strawberries. What else do I have in my garden? I think that's about it for the time being. I've got some plans to plant a few bits later on this year, but essentially, you know, so I do have a stock of fresh vegetables in my garden, which I do use regularly. I've got quite a nice herb patch as well. I do like cooking with fresh herbs, but again, between kind of these kind of dried foods, some of the canned stuff that I keep in the house, and the fresh vegetables and herbs in the garden, I'm fairly confident that if I did have a problem that prevented me from going out, using the local shops, that kind of thing, I've got plenty of food to keep me going for at least a week, if not longer. You know, I'm not expecting you know, proper end of the world scenario, and I think if something like that did happen, then you know, as would be most people, I'm woefully underprepared. But as far as just keeping a little bit extra, you know, I'm not living sort of, you know, relying on having to go out shopping every day or every week. You know, I just basically tend to keep enough food around to give me a week or two, just in case whatever the problem may be it financial, be it the fact that I can't get out for any reason. You know, there may have been a flood or some other kind of issue that prevents me from going out. And this food, now I've got about 4 of these containers that have various items such as this in there. I've got a little container of sports drinks here, which are very, very good for hydration. So if, for example, there was very little water available or something like that, you can add some of this kind of stuff in there, just to aid with hydration. It also got quite a lot of sugar in there, so it gives you a bit of energy as well. One of my other containers that I didn't bother digging out, I've got things like boiled sweets. I've got chocolate bars in there that have got quite a long shelf life. Things like Kendal mint cake is really, really good for energy levels. So it's the sort of thing that I generally take when I go out on the trail. So I've got you know, a really, really high calorie, high sugar snack, just to keep the energy levels up. But that's really it, guys. That is the extent to which I go for prepping in terms of food. I don't really go beyond this. I personally don't have any real need to, and because I'm not prepping for a particular scenario, especially a particularly serious scenario, that's as far as I need to go. Now obviously, if you are looking to start prepping, or you are prepping and you have a more sort of long-term goal in mind, a lot of this sort of stuff can be stored for a long time. You can look at things like mylar bags, where you can transfer the really large sacks of rice and pastas and things like that, and they can go straight in there. You can use, I think it's nitrogen off the top of my head, where you can basically sort of use the nitrogen to force the air out, seal the bag, so it's almost hermetically sealed. Something else that I do quite regularly, and you may have seen my other videos, I do dehydrate my own meat and vegetables. I do have a reasonable stock of those in, because I tend to use them for cooking and for camp food and things like that. So again, if you're someone like me who have a garden, you have your own vegetables, and you find you get a surplus and you don't want to give them away or sell them off, you know, you can dehydrate them. And when I have vegetables in sealed Kilner jars that I've had for well over a year, and they're just as well preserved now as they were when I first dried them. You can also look at things like canning, pressure canning, things like that. It's not something I've done. It's something I would like to experiment with at some point, but I just haven't got round to it yet. But there are a multitude of ways of taking either shop-bought or homegrown foods and preparing them and then preserving them for a much longer period. But anyway, guys, I hope it was useful. Any questions or comments, throw them in the box below. Hit like and subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I hope you'll join me next time. Thanks, guys.